It's no secret that my favorite dividend ETF is SCHD, but I wanted to clue you in on a couple other great dividend ETFs. Whether you want to find another good dividend ETF to add with SCHD, or just see what else is out there and maybe change to a different ETF or just have one of these as your dividend ETF, this video is going to give you 4 great ETFs that have amazing cash flow. Some of these have a lower actual dividend percentage, but a much higher chance to actually appreciate. And then some of these have an amazingly crazy high dividend that can actually get you to be able to live off of these dividends. If you have $500,000 invested in a fund that has a dividend yield of 4% like SCHD, you can reasonably expect a dividend of about $20,000 per year. That's not bad, but that's kind of tough to actually live off of. If you found a solid fund that had dividend of 20% on that same $500,000, you'd receive dividends of $100,000 per year. You could definitely live off of something like that, and a couple of these ETFs that I'm going to talk about today are in that ultra high dividend percentage category. In this video, I'm going to go from lowest yield to highest yield. And remember, there's definitely pros and cons for these types of dividend ETFs. And going with just the one with the highest yield is not necessarily the best option, but for some of you, it might actually be. Let's discuss. My name's Nolan Govea. My students call me Professor G, and I made this channel to make investing simplified. The 2 biggest reasons to invest in a dividend ETF is number 1, for that cash flow in the form of a dividend, but then number 2, for safety and sustainability within your portfolio. Most of these style ETFs have much less technology inside of them, so they're much less volatile than the rest of the stock market. This is going to diversify your portfolio and bring down your risk. The first ETF on this list does exactly that. It's much more stable, much more sustainable than pretty much any of the other ETFs out there in general, and it just brings a level of safety and consistency to any portfolio. This one's called MGV, and it's the Vanguard Mega Cap Value ETF. It has a dividend yield of 2.12% and expense ratio very low at 0.07%. Where SCHD is down negative 5.69% year to date, MGV is actually barely down at closer to 1%, even with all these tariffs and craziness going on. Since inception in 2007, so almost 20 years ago, MGV has an average appreciation of about 8% per year, which is great. MGV has a beta of 0.78 or so, which shows that it's way less volatile than something like the S&P 500. The reason why I like this one so much, especially, is this year right now that we're seeing. A lot of ETFs are down 15–20%, and this one is barely down, so it holds its value very, very well, especially in a down market. The thing that I love most about it, though, is its holdings. First, the portfolio is pretty balanced here, but it holds a solid amount of financials, healthcare, and industrials. As far as specific holdings, the top 10 are great. My favorite company, Berkshire Hathaway, leads the fund, and then we have solid recession-proof companies like JP Morgan, Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, and Walmart in those top 10. This is a great fund to bring down your risk overall in your portfolio. This next ETF on the list is one that many of you like much better than SCHD, but first, let me thank and introduce Snowball Analytics for sponsoring this video. You guys are gonna love this tool, especially for tracking those dividends. Snowball Analytics is a portfolio tracker that stands out. Think of it as the multi-tool for investors. What I really love is that the platform has a clean, intuitive design that's easy to navigate, and it's packed with charts and graphs that give you a deep dive into your portfolio and into individual stocks. My clients use this to show me their portfolio when we do portfolio reviews, and it makes it so simple. You can connect to your brokerage or just manually enter your holdings, or even try a demo portfolio to educate yourself. This platform is honestly the best that I've found for dividend investors specifically. This doesn't just show you share price changes, it also factors in dividend income, which many other trackers miss. I like that you can search top dividend stocks and you can search specifically for a certain sector. One of my favorite features is the dividend payout calendar. You can see which dividends are coming in each month and keep track of all of this that used to be so complicated, but now it's not. Snowball's backtest tool lets you see how the portfolio stacks up against benchmarks like the S&P 500, including dividends, and shows which stocks in your portfolio are doing the best in easy to read graphs. Anything you want to know about individual stocks, including their dividends, growth, and company metrics, can all be found here on the platform. I highly recommend that you check out Snowball Analytics with the link down in my description, and you can get 30% off today. Now, this next ETF on the list has a slightly higher dividend yield, but it definitely has a different portfolio makeup. Whereas that last one was more of a stable and sustainable option for your portfolio, bringing down the risk overall, this one's more of a hybrid between a dividend payer and also a growth ETF. It's going to have those cash yielding businesses that produce a nice solid cash flow, but then it also has those fun high tech companies too. This one's more of a hybrid rather than a true dividend ETF. This one's called DGRO, and over the past year it's up almost 8%, while SCHD is just about flat at only up 0.31% in the past year. The expense ratio is 0.08%. It has total holdings of 408, which means it's very diversified. The PE ratio is nice and low at 20. It has a dividend yield of 2.28%. The 10-year return on this thing is quite high for a dividend yielding ETF at 11.56% per year. Within the top holdings, you can see the type of mix in this portfolio. You see high growth tech companies like Microsoft and Apple, but then you also see solid dividend players like ExxonMobil, Johnson & Johnson, Broadcom, and AbbVie. DGR is heaviest in financials, then information tech, then healthcare, then consumer staples. If you're looking for a great ETF to pair with SCHD so that you could add in a little bit more of cash flow ETF, but then also pair it with something that's going to have that tech in there as well, this one's definitely an interesting add. Next ETF is pretty cool. Like I was talking about earlier in this video, if you really want to live off of those dividends, you're going to have to find something that pays a little bit higher of a dividend. For this section, my first go-to is JEPI and JEPQ, but I already made a video going over all of that, and so you can watch that video later on, and I'll link to it down in the description. For this video though, I wanted to go over one that's actually just like JEPI and JEPQ, but it's actually better on your taxes. For JEPI and JEPQ, one of the big gripes that I have is that the dividends that are paid out every single month are paid in ordinary income rather than qualified dividends. So instead of either of those, I like SPYI, which is the NEO's S&P 500 High Income ETF. And look at that monster dividend, 12.48%, and it pays its dividend every single month. In addition to potential upside capture, the fund offers layers of tax efficiency for income-oriented investors. SPYI and QQQI use index options which receive favorable tax treatment as Section 1256 contracts under IRS rules. Options held at year's end are treated as if sold at fair market value on the last market day. Any capital gains or losses are taxed at 60% long-term and 40% short-term, no matter how long investors hold them. The fund seeks to distribute high monthly income generated from the S&P 500 and implementing a data-driven call option strategy. This fund has only been around since 2022, so there's limited data, but from what I've seen so far, I do like it. That expense ratio is a bit higher at 0.68%, but if they're giving out a monthly dividend at over 12%, that's well worth it. The underlying assets are that of the S&P 500, so these top 10 companies look very familiar. Year to date, SPYI is actually down further than SCHD and will be a bit more volatile since it tracks the S&P 500 and writes calls against those, so it's definitely not one you would add to the portfolio to make it safer or less volatile. This is just one that you would add purely for an extra cash flow. For an ETF like this one, and then with the one that I'm going to talk about next that has an even bigger dividend yield, you'd want to add it in at like a smaller quantity compared to the other portion within your dividend portfolio. Like a split a lot of my clients do might be 70% SCHD, then 30% SPYI. On $1 million, $700,000 in SCHD with a 4% dividend will give about $28,000 per year. And then with $300,000 in SPYI with a 12% dividend, that will give about $36,000 per year. So that split would produce around $64,000 per year, or close to $5,500 in dividends forever. And if all of that was put into a Roth IRA, you're getting that $5,500 in dividends totally tax-free for life. That's pretty awesome. Now this last one has a dividend yield upwards of 30%, and that's not a typo. It's also a monthly payer, and it's one that a couple of my clients have been using recently, and they told me about it, and at first I was a bit skeptical, but I did do some research and I wanted to share it with you. BTCI is another NEOS fund, and it's the Bitcoin High Income ETF. Check out that over 30% dividend yield, and yes, very high fee at 0.98%. BTCI aims to offer exposure to Bitcoin via ETPs with a data-driven call option overlay that seeks high monthly income and upside potential. The fund may provide a way to pursue high levels of current income from Bitcoin's price volatility. And when we look at the chart, that thing is definitely volatile because it's going up and down a lot, which makes sense. Bitcoin is a volatile asset. Overall, in the past year, BTCI is up 13.54%, and so that, with a huge 30% dividend, is pretty solid. This one is for sure the most risky and the most speculative. Bitcoin is something where it goes up a good amount and then it can drop a good amount, so you do need to understand the Bitcoin cycle and understand what you're investing here. For any one of my clients that have wanted to get into this one, I say keep it to about 10% or so of the dividend portfolio. Yes, there is some nice options to be able to get some solid cash flow. I just don't want it to be the bulk of your portfolio, pulling that thing down if Bitcoin does drop heavily. Watch either of these videos to keep you going strong in your investing journey. Remember to keep investing simplified.